Hi, so I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's actually quite close to my heart. And you probably guessed what it is from the title of the video. Now, I've been running this channel for something like 8 or 9 years, and there's something like 160,000 subscribers, and I've probably had about 2 million posts, something round about that. And I did ages ago a video on guidelines for making posts onto the channel. And it's common sense stuff. Be polite, don't be aggressive, try not to troll. If you do that, be aware that it's moderated, you know, the kind of stuff. And I do moderate the channel. Now, given those stats over that time, I've had to block 52 people, which to be honest is really insignificant when you think about the numbers that we're talking about. It's a very tiny percentage. But I'm very keen that the channel is supportive. I'm keen that the channel actually encourages education, exploration, thinking about things. That's what the channel's all about, which is why I moderate the comments. Now, other people's sense of humour I appreciate are not quite the same as mine, and people say stuff that they don't really think is harmful because they're not thinking it through or because they're different people. So what I normally do is I normally write a post on something that I think's a bit iffy, a bit stepped over the line, just to give the people a chance, really. And some people are just like that. They make a post, they were just joking, they don't mean any harm by it, and they immediately apologise. Now, it's not to me particularly, I mean, you know, it's water off a duck's back. I've heard just about everything. So it doesn't really bother me. It's more about other people, and I don't want other people to feel that they can't say what they feel they should say without fear of ridicule. It should be open. Now, that's what I tend to do. But there was one post that I actually removed without warning. And I removed it without warning, but didn't block the guy because I didn't give him his warning, but I did remove the post. And I removed the post because it was really, well, to be honest, offensive to me in a personal level. And I don't know, I don't think the guy really meant any harm by it. I just think it's his approach to things. But I find that approach really an anathema. I just don't understand it. And the post was, be careful of blowing down that pipe, you might get a staph infection. Now that seems really harmless, doesn't it? But actually when you look at that and start to think about that a little bit, and of course I think about these things, you start to realise there are two main things going on in that post. One, the guy's giving advice when he clearly doesn't understand what he's talking about. And two, he's just inculcating fear of doing something. Now, I'm just about 60 years old, and I've been working on this stuff probably since I was about 13 or 14, so something like 46 years. So it's not like I don't know what I'm doing. I have had a lot of experience in what I'm doing. And I was always taught that when you get a piece of metal, the first thing you do is clean it. Not because you want to be clean or anything, but because you'll damage what it is you're doing. Metals are very often stored with a thin coat of oil on them to protect them from oxidation and rust. So when you get it to the workshop, you give it a clean with a bit of IPA or a bit of acetone, just to remove that oil, really. Of course, metals are sold and they're very often covered in sticky labels, so they're covered in glue. So you're not going to be able to mark them, you're not going to be able to saw them properly, so you clean them. The first thing you do with a bit of metal before you begin work on it is give it a clean. Then obviously you mark it, you drill it, you saw it, you file it, you turn it in a lathe, and then when you've done all of that, you clean it again. So that piece of metal that I blew down, because it is an air engine actually, had in fact been cleaned twice and was probably cleaner than dinner at a restaurant. Now the guy clearly didn't know that. I'm assuming that the guy doesn't work with metal, because if he'd worked with metal he would know that's what you do with metal. So that comment, to my mind, I mean, what I'm assuming here is that comment was based on ignorance. Making comments based on ignorance really is, it's annoying beyond belief. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. Plenty of people disagree with me, and plenty of people make suggestions that are far better than things I come up with. So I learn a lot from people by listening to what they're saying. But I do mind comments when they're based on ignorance. If a comment is ignorant, I get really quite upset by it. I don't like it at all. So while I'm making this video about informed comments, there's just one thing I want to point out actually. That's this chuck key here in the lathe. I get a lot of comments from people telling me not to put the chuck key in the lathe, and when I was at school that's exactly what they told me too. And then I get told about all these horrendous accidents that have ever happened. And like I say, in 46 years of working on lathes and working with people who have lathes, I've heard that story hundreds of times. Do you know how many people I've met who have that accident? None. I've never met anybody who has been injured by a flying chuck key. But I've met hundreds of people who told me that they know people who have been hit by flying chuck keys. Just don't understand. I suspect it's a modern myth. And I also suspect that there are going to be lots of people on the comments who are going to tell me about how a friend of theirs was hit by a flying chuck key. I'm sure they were. That's awesome. Thank you very much for that post. But I have never met anybody who has been hit by a flying chuck key. But that aside, you should not leave a chuck key in a chuck normally. That's very true. But that lathe actually has a mechanical lock on it. When that chuck key's in there, you can't turn that chuck. Because you can't turn that chuck, this is the guard, that guard won't close. When the guard won't close, there's a switch inside that prevents the lathe from being turned on. So we can't turn the chuck, we can't close the guard, and we can't turn the lathe on. The single safest place for that chuck key is in that chuck. Now, you don't know that. Only I know that because it's my lathe. What you're doing is applying a general rule to a specific circumstance. And that's okay. Usually that's not wrong. But it's better to ask about the circumstance. Rather than don't leave the chuck key in the chuck, why don't you say, why do you leave your chuck key in the chuck? Why don't you just ask? And I'm happy to tell you why I do that. But you're applying a general rule to a specific circumstance that is wrong. Now, as a method, really, I would suggest it's better to find out if there are any specific circumstances before you rail about how wrong something is. But I wanted to add that in here because it's an example of prevention. Just applying general rules without thinking it through, without finding out the specific circumstances. It's one of those things like fear that actually contributes to you holding people back. Now, I'm pretty sure that that's not the intent. I'm pretty sure there what people are thinking about is the safety of other folk, and that's a great thing. But it's always the case, I think, that when you apply general to the specific, you're wrong. You need to find out about the specific before you apply the general. But that seemed to fit in here, so I thought I would add it. The main thing, actually, that troubled me about it was the fear factor. And the guy didn't know anything about what had happened to that metal. And then he looked for danger. I mean, to be honest, the danger of a staph infection was next to nothing. He might have said, be careful blowing down it because you might get a metal splinter in your lip. That's far more likely than a staph infection from it. But obviously I'd cleaned that, I'd sanded it and smoothed it, because I knew I was going to blow down it, so there was no chance of a metal spell. But the guy could have warned of that. But he clearly was looking for something to warn us all about. Be careful, don't do it because you need to look out for that. And that is such a common story that you hear all of the time from people when you're doing something. Don't do it, be afraid. You need to watch out for this. You're better off not doing it because this danger may occur. And yes, it's true, danger may occur. But then that's life. Life is risk and danger. The minute you step out the door, a piece of aeroplane may well fall on you. Now, that's not a crazy thing. We have a lot of aeroplanes, lots of flight paths that de-ice themselves when they're up there, and that ice has been known to fall to the ground and damage cars. Now, I think nobody's actually been killed by that. I'm not 100% sure. But it's a real danger. The minute you step out the door, you're in danger all of the time. And we all know this. How many people walking across a bridge would have thought that somebody would drive on the pavement? Danger is around us all of the time. You can't escape it. But you can mitigate against it with experience and with taking care. That you can do. But you shouldn't be afraid of doing something. You shouldn't do something just because of the fear involved in it. That's what really gets me. is that so often we're told not to do something and we're told to be afraid of doing it. And we are afraid of doing it. And when we're afraid of doing it, we don't do it. And I think that's wrong. I don't think that you should be blasé about stuff. I think you should inform yourself of the dangers and mitigate against them. But I don't think you should let that fear stop you from doing anything. And when somebody comes up and is fear-mongering out of ignorance, then it is a surefire way of really upsetting me. And because of that, that's why I removed the video. I removed the comment. Hopefully the guy won't make any more comments like that, and I won't have to remove any more. But he's not a bad lad. He's a nice fella. He's usually very supportive of people, and he makes great comments, and you know. But that instance of it, really, I just couldn't really put up with that instance and have that comment there, so I had to remove it. And I apologise for that because, you know, it's my personal bent. But then equally, this is my channel and it's the message I want to put out there. Now, part of the message is to share with people, yes, and to listen to criticism, yes, and I do link to other people's videos and I show people's videos and I watch them and I keep an eye on what people are doing if they want me to look. I try to do all of that. So I do try to share and make it open. But equally, it is my channel, so it is going to carry my message. It's the one that I want to say. Now, there is always a line with these things, and that guy crossed that line with that comment. I think, to sum up really, that you should try things. You should try to mitigate your chances of injury for certain. But you should try things, and you should not let fear stop you. Most of our fears are irrational anyway. Anyway, I hope that was of interest. I just wanted to discuss it, and thank you very much for watching.